the Fearless Money Management Podcast, where we empower women to take control of their finances. I'm your host, Claire Strong, and today we're chatting with financial expert Lisa Risser about how to prioritize your financial goals. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Claire. How are you?
I'm doing good. What's happening your end?
Busy as usual, just like all the rest of us.
You're crazy busy. This woman, I'm telling you, Lisa, you're my idol. I want to be you. She's traveling here, there, and everywhere. She is just, you are on all the time. I'm always in awe of how much you can fit in. Well, that brings us kind of nicely to today's topic. And it's something that as a financial newbie, I'm on my financial freedom journey along with a lot of our listeners. So we're doing this together, ladies. But I find it difficult to know how to prioritize things when it comes to my finances. And today's episode is all about how to do that, how to prioritize your financial goals. So what does that look like, Lisa?
I think the first step to prioritizing your financial goals is to really identify two categories of goals. You've got your short-term goals, and then you have your long-term goals. So your short-term goals, first of all, they can be, I want to pay off my credit card debt. I want to pay off my student loans. I don't have an emergency fund. I need an emergency fund in case some really large unexpected expenses or job loss or something happens. Or I want to put a down payment on a house. I want to stop renting. I'd like to buy a house. I need to save for a down payment. Those types of things can be really good short-term goals for you. So identify your short-term goals and kind of list those out. And don't have 10 of them, just like 3 to 5. What are your top short-term financial goals?
Yeah, just so I've got this clear in my head. So by short-term, you mean things like credit card debt, maybe, that repair in the house that you need to cover, that type of thing. Things that are kind of like imminent. Yeah, okay. Do we give like a timeline to short-term goals? Is there like an official timeline we should be following, like the next 6 months or the next year? I mean, what do we mean when we say short-term? I guess is what I'm wanting to know.
It doesn't have to be specific, but usually like 6 months to a year would probably be about a good timeline for short-term goals. It could be, I want to save for a vacation. There's this great vacation I want to take and I want to save for it. So those types of things is what you want to stick into your short-term goals.
Okay. And then long-term goals, what type of thing would like come under that category?
Long-term goals could be, I want to save for retirement. I want to save $529K for my kids, which helps with college tuition down the line, which we know is getting more expensive every single year.
Oh, yeah. I'm fast approaching that.
Yeah. Those are the kinds of things. Or you could have something else that's just a long-term goal. Maybe you want to buy a house, but you're not going to be able to buy one in the next year. So maybe that's not a short-term goal to save for down payment. Maybe that's a long-term goal. Yeah. In the next 5 years, I'd like to save enough money so I can buy a house.
Okay.
Those are the types of things that would be then long-term versus short-term. And you want to separate those out a little bit because you look at them a little bit differently in terms of how you prioritize and attack those goals.
I have a question, and this is because I'm from the UK originally, as you can tell by my not very American accent. You mentioned something before. You said college savings fund. What was that? You mentioned a type of an account. I actually haven't heard of that before. What was that?
So a 529 plan is a way that you can save for tuition.
Okay.
And it could be your kids, it could be a niece or nephew or family member or anybody. Sometimes grandparents like to do it for their grandchildren.
Ooh.
And it's a way of saving and investing that has positive tax implications.
Good.
And so and then you could save it for tuition or any sort of school related expenses.
Relating to college. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you
Yes.
for clearing that up because, as we've discussed, quite a few times already on our new podcast, this podcast is really, I'm the audience here, Lisa. I'm that woman who, wants to regain or even, starting out and wants to actually have financial freedom and have a good working knowledge of her finances. And so with that comes a lot of questions. So I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions along our journey, Lisa.
Well, that's what we want to hear, because the questions you have, Claire, are probably the questions that our audience has.
Oh, they are. And I want to say to you that things are very different here. So for people that aren't American, they may have moved here from a different country like I did. We don't have a lot of these accounts that you're talking about. There isn't such a thing in England as that specific college account. And so, when you say things like that to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so I guess where I'm going at with this is that no question is silly. There is no such thing as a silly question when it comes to finances. And when it comes to this podcast, this is a safe space for us to grow, make mistakes, and ask questions. And so, for our listeners, as we go along this journey together, please send us your questions. If there's something that, maybe you've not been able to discuss with someone else because you think it's a silly question. It's not a silly question, I can assure you, because if that's a silly question, then I'm going to be asking thousands of them throughout our journey. So thank you for answering that. Okay, so we've established, first of all, when it comes to prioritizing our financial goals, that we set aside our short-term goals and then lay out our long-term goals. Okay, then what? So we've done that. What do we do then?
So then you want to look at how much you're going to be able to start putting towards your short-term and your long-term goals. And there's a general guideline, which is called the 50-30-20 rule. The general guideline for your personal finances is that no more than 50% of your income should go towards your necessities, which is like housing, utilities, and groceries. So your fixed, mostly fixed expenses, those expenses that you really, you can't live without, they're necessities.
Essentials, yes. Okay, so 50%.
The 30% is your discretionary spending. So those are going out, your hobbies. That could be for your vacations, entertainment, all of those other expenses that you can survive without, but they're your normal expenses that you have. And so the goal is to have about 30% of your income that goes towards all of those expenses.
50% of your income is basically for necessities. 30% of your income should be towards discretionary spending, like things that are nice to have but not essentials. Okay, so what do we do with the remaining 20%?
So the 20% should go towards savings and debt repayment. And so that 20% should be really your short-term and your long-term goals.
Okay.
So that way you can, and that's the goal. Now, not everybody is there. And if you're not there and you don't have 20% that you can put towards your short-term and long-term goals, then you can look at the 30% of your discretionary, or whatever the amount you're spending on your discretionary. Try to see what you can do. And we talked about that previously, how you can reduce your expenses, your discretionary expenses, so that you have more potentially available for savings and for debt repayment. So the goal is to have 20%. Even if you're not at 20%, you can still start taking whatever amount that you have for savings and investments and start taking those towards your short-term and your long-term goals.
So this is the 50-30-20 rule, but as you've just alluded to, what if we can't exactly match that ratio? Is it still okay? Can we kind of adapt this rule, I guess is what I'm asking you, to our personal situation? Because it may be that right now, I can't save 20%. I just can't. I'd love to. I just can't. My necessities, my rent is right now, too high. My mortgage is too high. And so, but is that okay too? So if we couldn't exactly meet those ratios, can we just do what we can, I guess is what I'm asking.
You can. And if you can take $100 a month, you still have $100 a month that you can start to either pay off debt or to save. And those are still good things.
Yeah.
So if you can just have a certain amount, and what you want to do is you want to, if you have a budget and you're managing your discretionary spending as much as you can, and you don't have the 20% towards savings and debt repayment, you still have something there. We still want women to feel empowered that you have something. And if it's $100 a month, it's still something. And so then focus on that $100 a month and figure out your highest priorities then of where that should go.
There is nothing worse, and I'm speaking from experience here because I've had times in my life where I have not been earning money, whether it's because I've been a stay-at-home mum because the girls were very young and it didn't make sense to pay for childcare. And so I took a couple of years out of my career to be with them. Or whether it's, my move here to the States. If a financial advisor were to have advised me before I moved here, they would have said, don't do it, because I was an anchor at the BBC. I had, for the first time in my life, had some real financial stability and freedom. I had been through a divorce, but managed to rebuild myself. I put myself back through university and got my master's degree. I'd pay for my own divorce. I even paid for the dentist. It was a 3Ds. It was degree, divorce, and dentist. I paid for them all myself, and I felt bloody good about it too. But when I moved over here, I took a real sidestep, if not a step back career-wise, to be over here, if I'm being honest. And with that came a lack of financial freedom. And so there's nothing worse than not having any money to fall back on in your own right. Like, I don't care what my husband earns. He's a lawyer. He earns good money. That's a him thing. I mean, yes, we're married, and, yes, to a large extent, things should be shared. But ultimately, I don't like asking him for money. I don't want to ask him, oh, this has come up for the girls. Can I have this? I don't like being in that position. And unfortunately, I have been in that position more than once in my life, and there's nothing worse than feeling like that. It's like a feeling of desperation, Lisa. You feel trapped, like you're trapped in a corner and there's nowhere to go. And so I love that you're saying to me, hey, listen, if you can't put $1,000 a month aside, it's okay. If you can put 50 aside or 100 aside, because that's what you can do right now today, that is a damn sight better than putting 0 aside, because even having that small cushion is so much better psychologically, if nothing else, than having 0 there for you. So it sounds like even a little bit's better than nothing when it comes to this.
Well, and it just keeps adding up. So a little bit every month still adds up to quite a bit over a period of time. And it's really focused on that part of it. And it's, if you have that budget and you're tracking your expenses, and you're doing the best you can to manage your discretionary spending, and you're keeping that, and you can say, okay, well, I can save $50 a month or $100 a month for savings or to pay down debt. It really is empowering, and it really does help you then to see some progress. Either your debt's going down a little bit every month, or you're saving. And if you can save a little bit every month over the long term, it really starts to compound and add to quite a bit over a period of time.
Okay, so I'm getting the ratio here and the rationale behind all of this. So, generally it's a 50-30-20 rule. So I think I'm okay with that. Here's the thing. This is where I will get overwhelmed because I'm going to try this out for myself. Because as I've said to you, I'm starting along this journey with our listeners. So I'm right there with you guys. But I know that it's when I come to start this, I don't know where to start though, Lisa. So how do I prioritize which goals are more important than others? Like, where do I put my money is what I'm trying to say to you. Which area of my, expenditure should get priority over other ones, for example?
Well, it depends where you are in the journey, of course. But the first things you really
Okay.
want to look at is if you have any high interest debt,
Right.
especially, so mostly that's credit card debt. And if you have an emergency fund.
Mm.
So if you don't have an emergency fund, or you have high interest debt, or you have both, then you might want to do 50-50 for each of them. Because high interest debt, those credit
Okay.
card, I mean, I don't know. I mean, now the interest rates on those credit cards are just absolutely astounding. And if you're only making the minimum payment every
Yeah, they are.
month, you're just never going to get anywhere. So if you can pay a little extra on your long-term, in your high interest debt, like credit cards, it just start chipping away. And if you don't
Okay.
have an emergency fund, so if you lose your job or your spouse loses their job, or you have a major expense, which could be a major car repair or house repair or something that happens, you need to, and you don't have any emergency fund. An emergency fund just has to be, ideally, you would like to have 3 to 6 months saved that would be easily accessible if there was an emergency to cover your expenses. So 3 to 6 months of expenses if there was an emergency that happened,
Okay.
like loss of a job. And sometimes it can be medical, right? Because maybe there's
Yeah.
a significant, medical issue that comes up that maybe your spouse can't work and they're, maybe they have cancer, or, things come up in life all the time. And so you just want to be able to have that emergency fund, which doesn't need to be sitting in a savings account, but it has to be something that you could easily access if you needed to for 3 to 6 months of expenses. Now, if you have an emergency fund and you don't have high interest debt, then you can get into other types of savings. But those would be the two areas of the first level of priority, would be looking at those two.
So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to identify my short-term, long-term goals. Okay.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to figure out what percentage of my income goes to what. So ideally half goes to necessities, 30% goes to, things like my kids. In my case, my girls dancing, which, my God, is a bloody extortionate, which is why they only do one hobby, because that hobby equates to about 23 hobbies. When it comes to the cost. And then ideally we're saving 20%. So what if, here's the thing, say I have a long-term goal, say I do want to save for a down payment on a house. I'm just speaking about, how I would feel potentially about this. How do you not get discouraged when your goal, it just seems so far in the future and almost unobtainable to an extent? How do you keep persevering and staying the course, I guess, when it comes to prioritizing your financial goals?
Well, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay, that's a good analogy.
And so think about it as just making a little bit of progress. Again, it's just like if you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
Just looking at it in small increments of making progress. And then over the long run, you're making progress, you'll get there eventually, even if it's not as quickly as you would like.
Okay.
You'll still eventually get there. And you just want to just keep focused on that, and focused, especially for the long-term goals, on their long-term. And so you just want to keep moving towards it and inching towards it. And if it's really slow, you're not competing with anybody except for yourself, right? So you just keep moving along.
Yes, I like
and
that.
keep doing what you can.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is that hopefully along the way, you have some increases in your income. And if your income is increasing, then you're going to have a little more money available every month at the end of the month for you to start paying off your, debt or saving and investing. So it's your expense side, but it's also your income side. So you want to watch, if you get a promotion or you get a bonus, can you take that additional amount? The tough part is whenever you get a promotion or you get a bonus or some other additional income that beyond what you've normally been receiving, it's easy to add your discretionary spending and increase it by the same amount. So if you can
Yes.
keep yourself from doing that, you can take that amount and move that into debt repayment and savings.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, for example, in my case, we have this storage. When I say we, it's actually my husband. So this is on you. I'm blaming him for this. It's his storage. He has this storage facility. Seriously, he's had it for years. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's full of stuff that I'm sure we're never going to use, that are never going to be, usable things in this house. But for some reason, he just hasn't had the time to sort through this storage shed or whatever you want to call it. And so that is costing us a ridiculous amount of money every month. And this has been going on for years. And so what I've said to him is, well, once we get rid of that, which needs to happen like 3 years ago, that money we can use to join this really nice, family, gym place down the street from us, which costs about the same. Now, are you telling me, Lisa, that that's actually not a good strategy? And instead of replacing that cost with another cost, albeit I think one that we're obviously all going to get much more value from, you would say that actually take that money and save it or do something else with it rather than just spend it again?
I would say what probably for most people is don't completely add back in discretionary spending in another category. So maybe you can do something to improve your health, and maybe there's a gym that's a lower cost gym, and then you take the difference between that now and you put that into savings. So now you got something that you can do, but maybe it's not, maybe this gym is just cost less. So maybe there's still some money that you can add into your savings. So if you look for every opportunity to add, so normally when you're saving, you have a certain amount that you save every month. And if you can make it an automated transfer out of your account every month and you don't have to physically do that, it's a lot easier to save that way too. So if you do that automatically, it'll be the same amount then every month and you don't even think about it because it's always happens every month. And then when something happens like, oh, I don't need this discretionary spending anymore for this storage unit, I can take half of that or more than half of that and add it to my savings. So now my savings just jumped up, or there's a bonus, you get a bonus. Okay. Or you get a promotion or a pay raise. You take the majority, if at all possible, try to take as much of that as you can and just have it added to the amount every month that is automatically transferred into either debt repayment or into savings and investments. And that's how you really start to make a lot more impact.
Okay. And I like the idea of you saying that it's better to automate this because then you don't need to think about it. That's one less thing for us to do because we're always so crazy busy. And then also, I guess there's a discipline element of that as well, because if it's left down to your own devices, maybe you may not be quite as disciplined that week or that month because, but this came up, so I can justify not putting that money towards, savings or whatever that month. So I like that. Well, I'd love, Lisa, to hear from our listeners. I'd love to hear, how do you go about prioritizing financial goals? Is this something that you already do? Or have you got any questions for Lisa? Because Lisa's clearly an expert on this topic. So please, shoot us a message and we'd love to hear from you. And so that brings us to the end of today's episode of Fearless Money Management. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us to reach even more amazing women on their journey to financial freedom. Bye for now.